I never thought it would be the coffee that finally made me leave. The burn spread across my face like wildfire, the scalding liquid seeping into my skin as I stumbled backward. The porcelain mug shattered against the wall behind me, adding its own scars to our already battle-worn apartment. 6 years of marriage reduced to this moment, me cowering, him towering over me, his eyes glazed with alcohol and rage. "If you were smarter, you would have hidden that money better," David snarled, his voice cutting through the ringing in my ears. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat radiating from my skin. Our savings, all of it gone. 6 years of careful budgeting, of me taking extra shifts at the hospital, of sacrificing vacations and new clothes and dinners out, all of it spent in a single weekend of drinking with his friends. How could you? My voice was barely a whisper. That was for our future. David laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through our small kitchen. What future, Anna? Look at us. You really think we have some big, bright future ahead? I stood frozen, watching him grab his keys from the counter. This wasn't the man I had fallen in love with. That David had been gentle, ambitious, with dreams that matched my own. That David had held me when I cried, had surprised me with wildflowers picked from the side of the road, had promised me the world. This David, this stranger, had been emerging slowly over our 6 years together, like a photograph developing in reverse, the clear image fading into something unrecognizable. "I'm going out," he muttered, already halfway to the door. "Don't wait up." The door slammed behind him, and the apartment fell into a familiar silence. I moved mechanically to the bathroom, wincing as I examined my face in the mirror. The skin was already turning an angry red, but there wouldn't be lasting damage. Not physical damage anyway. I opened the medicine cabinet and reached for the aloe gel, my hand pausing as I caught sight of the small prescription bottle pushed to the back. Sleeping pills from when I couldn't stop the nightmares. I hadn't needed them in months. Something inside me shifted, a quiet click like a lock finally turning. I closed the cabinet without taking the aloe and walked to our bedroom, pulling my old suitcase from the top shelf of the closet. My movements were calm, methodical. I packed only what I needed: clothes, toiletries, my nursing license, and credentials. I left my wedding photos, the gifts from his family, the life we had built together. But there was one thing I couldn't leave behind. I reached to the very back of my closet, behind winter coats and shoes I rarely wore, and pulled out a small wooden box. I ran my fingers over the carved surface, feeling the smooth wood beneath my touch. For 5 years, I had kept this box hidden, unable to part with it, but unable to look inside. 5 years ago, I had been a different woman, hopeful, excited, pregnant. I snapped the box shut before memories could flood in and tucked it into my suitcase. David wouldn't notice it was missing. He didn't know it existed. With my suitcase packed and by the door, I took one last look around our apartment. So many memories lived in these walls. Some beautiful, many painful. On the refrigerator, a photo of us from our honeymoon, smiling and sunburned on a beach in Mexico. On the coffee table, the glass figurine his mother had given us as a wedding present. In the kitchen, the mug set we had received as a housewarming gift when we first moved in together, now one mug short. I took my phone out and called Sarah, my oldest friend from nursing school. "Can I stay with you tonight?" I asked when she answered. "Anna, what's wrong?" Concern flooded her voice. "I'll explain when I get there. I need somewhere to go." "Of course. You know you don't even have to ask. I'll make up the guest room." I thanked her and hung up, slipping my phone into my pocket. I grabbed a piece of paper from the notepad we kept by the phone, scribbled a quick note, and left it on the kitchen counter. Then I picked up my suitcase, walked out the door, and didn't look back. That night, as I lay in Sarah's guest bedroom staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not for the man who had thrown coffee in my face, but for the woman who had stayed with him far too long. For the dreams we had shared and lost. For the child who never had a chance to be born. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a blissful moment, I forgot everything. Where I was, why I was there. Then reality crashed down, and I reached instinctively for my phone. 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, 23 text messages. David had come home to an empty apartment. I scrolled through the text messages, watching them evolve from confusion to anger to desperate pleas. The last one, sent just 10 minutes ago, made my blood run cold. I found the box, Anna. Why did you hide this from me? Call me back now. My phone rang in my hand, David's name lighting up the screen. I stared at it, heart pounding in my chest. What had I done? I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail, my hands trembling. How had he found the box so quickly? I had left it in plain sight. Yes, but I never imagined he would open it. David never looked through my things. It was one boundary he had always respected. The phone rang again. And again. On the 4th call, I finally answered. Anna. His voice was thick, unsteady. Anna, what is this? What does this mean? I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tightly against my ear. You opened it. Of course I opened it. You left a note saying everything you need to know is in the box. What did you think I would do? I took a deep breath. I thought you would see what was inside. A baby shoe. A tiny, perfect baby shoe. His voice broke. Anna, please, tell me what this means. 5 years. For 5 years I had carried this secret alone, tucked it away in the darkest corners of my heart. For 5 years, I had watched David's drinking worsen, had endured his mood swings and verbal lashings, had made excuses for the occasional shove or thrown object. For 5 years, I had convinced myself that the man I married was still in there somewhere, that if I just loved him enough, supported him enough, he would come back to me. I was pregnant, I said, the words falling from my lips like stones. 5 years ago, I found out the day you got that promotion at work. What? The shock in his voice was genuine. But you never... Why didn't you tell me? I rose from the bed and walked to the window, looking out at Sarah's quiet suburban street. Children were riding bikes. A man was walking his dog. A woman was collecting her mail. Normal life continuing all around me while mine was shattering into pieces. I was going to surprise you. I bought that shoe the day I found out. I was so excited, David. So happy. The memory was still sharp, still painful. But then you came home that night, remember? Your coworkers had taken you out to celebrate the promotion. I could hear him struggling to remember. I came home late. You came home drunk. Beyond drunk. You could barely stand. My voice was steadier now, the words flowing after being dammed up for so long. You started yelling about how I had rearranged the living room furniture while you were gone. I hadn't touched anything, David, but you were so angry. You threw the coffee table across the room. Silence on the other end of the line. I tried to calm you down. I tried to get you to go to bed, but you grabbed me. You shook me so hard I thought my teeth would rattle out of my head. You pushed me into the wall. No, he whispered. No, I wouldn't have. I don't remember doing that. I know you don't. You never remember the worst parts. I wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. I didn't lose the baby that night, but I started spotting the next day. 2 days later, I miscarried. I never told you because by then you had apologized for being a little out of control that night. You promised it would never happen again. You said you loved me. Anna, his voice was pleading now. Anna, I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I know you didn't. The strange calm that had come over me the night before returned. And that's the problem, David. You never know what you're doing when you're like that. You never remember the worst parts of yourself. But if I had known about the baby, things would have been different. I would have changed. I would have stopped drinking. I laughed. A bitter sound that surprised even me. Like you promised to stop after you dislocated my shoulder last year? Or after you put your fist through the wall next to my head? Or after you emptied our bank account to party with your friends? That's not fair, he said, his voice hardening. I've been trying. You know I've been trying. No, David, you've been pretending. There's a difference. In the background, I heard a knock on his door. Our door. Hold on, he muttered, and I heard muffled voices. When he came back on the line, his voice had changed, become frantic. My mother's here. She's worried about you. We all are. Just come home, Anna. We can talk about this. We can fix this. His mother. Of course she would be there. Helen had always been David's most ardent defender, dismissing his behavior as high spirits and just how men are sometimes. She had once told me, after David had smashed my favorite vase against the wall, that a good wife knows when to keep quiet and how to avoid provoking her husband. "I'm not coming home," I said firmly. "Don't be ridiculous. Where will you go? What will you do for money? All your things are here." I thought of my nursing license, safely packed in my suitcase. I thought of Sarah, who had held me as I sobbed last night, who had promised me I could stay as long as I needed. I thought of the life I had started to imagine for myself on that long drive to her house. A life without constant fear, without walking on eggshells, without apologies that meant nothing. "I'll figure it out," I said. "Goodbye, David." "Wait." The panic in his voice was palpable. "Anna, please. I need to see you. Just once. To talk face to face. You owe me that much." I owed him nothing. But something in his voice, a desperation I had never heard before, made me hesitate. "I can't today," I said finally. "I need time. Tomorrow then. Please. I need to understand what happened, why you never told me about our baby. Our baby." The words sent a shiver through me. For so long it had been my private grief, my solitary burden. To hear him claim it, to make it ours. "Fine, tomorrow. But not at the apartment. Somewhere public. The park by your hospital. Noon." "All right." I hung up before he could say anything else, before I could change my mind. I sat back on the edge of the bed, my hands still shaking. What had I done? I had kept this secret for so long, had built walls around it so high that even I rarely looked over them. Now I had exposed it, laid it bare before the one person who had the most power to hurt me. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. Sarah poked her head in, a mug of coffee in her hand. "Hey, you're up. I brought you." "Oh God, Anna, what happened?" I touched my cheek, suddenly remembering the burn from the coffee. It must have looked worse this morning. "David," I said simply. Sarah set the coffee down and sat beside me on the bed, taking my hands in hers. "Tell me everything." And I did. For the first time, I told someone everything. Not just about the coffee and the emptied bank account, but about the pregnancy, the miscarriage, the years of verbal abuse that had gradually escalated to physical violence. As I spoke, I felt something shifting inside me, a weight being lifted that I hadn't realized I had been carrying. "I'm meeting him tomorrow," I finished. "At the park." Sarah's grip on my hands tightened. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," I admitted. "But I need to do this. For me, not for him. I need to face him one more time." "I'm coming with you." I started to protest, but the determination in her eyes stopped me. "Okay," I agreed, "but stay at a distance." "This is something I need to do myself." She nodded, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small business card. "Before you go, I want you to call this number. It's a domestic violence counselor I worked with at the hospital. She's amazing, Anna. She can help you figure out what to do next." I took the card, turning it over in my hands. What to do next? The thought was overwhelming. For 6 years, my life had been entwined with David's. Now I was facing a future alone, uncharted territory stretching out before me. "Did I do the right thing?" I whispered, more to myself than to Sarah. "Leaving?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Anna. The only wrong thing would have been staying until he really hurt you, until his apologies came too late." I nodded, tucking the counselor's card into my pocket. Tomorrow I would face David one last time. Tomorrow I would finally say all the things I had kept inside for too long. What I didn't know then was that David had plans of his own. Plans that would change everything I thought I knew about my husband, about our marriage, and about myself. The park was quiet for a weekday noon, just a few mothers with strollers and elderly couples on benches. I spotted David immediately, sitting at a picnic table near the pond. He was hunched forward, hands clasped between his knees, looking down at the ground. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. I glanced back to the parking lot where Sarah waited in her car. ready if I needed her. She gave me a reassuring nod, and I squared my shoulders, walking toward my husband. He looked up as I approached, his face lighting with hope that quickly faded as he saw the bruise on my cheek. The coffee had left an angry red mark that had darkened overnight to a purplish stain. Anna. He stood as I reached the table, his hands twitching at his sides like he wanted to touch me but knew better. Thank you for coming. I sat across from him, keeping the table between us. You wanted to talk, so talk. He sat back down, rubbing his palms against his jeans. I noticed his hands were shaking. I haven't had a drink, he said, as if reading my thoughts. Not since you left. It's been one day, David. I know. He looked down at his hands. But it's a start. I said nothing, waiting. I called my doctor yesterday, he continued. I've made an appointment to talk about getting help. For the drinking. You've said that before. I know. But this time is different. He reached across the table, not quite touching me. This time I know what I lost. The baby. He meant the baby. Anger flared in me, hot and sudden. You didn't lose anything, I said, my voice low and hard. I lost it. I carried it. I grieved it. Alone. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, Anna, I'm so sorry. If I had known… What? What would have been different? Would you have stopped drinking then? Would you have stopped raging at me for things I didn't do? Would you have become a different man overnight? He flinched at my words. I would have tried harder. I would have gotten help sooner. Why? I demanded. Why would a baby have been enough reason when I wasn't? The question hung between us, unanswerable. In his silence, I saw the truth. He didn't know why. He couldn't explain why the idea of a child would have changed him when his love for me hadn't been enough. I brought something, he said finally, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small photograph, creased and worn at the edges, and placed it on the table between us. I recognized it immediately. Us on our honeymoon, standing on a beach in Maui. I was laughing, my head thrown back, while David looked at me with such love it was almost painful to see now. Do you remember what you said to me that day? He asked softly. I shook my head, though I did remember. I remembered everything about that trip, about that version of us. You said, this is what happiness feels like. Remember this moment. He touched the edge of the photo with one finger. I've kept this in my wallet ever since, to remember. I swallowed hard, fighting back unexpected tears. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to know that I remember who we were. I remember how I used to look at you, how it felt to love you without… He gestured vaguely. Without all this between us. David, please just let me finish. He took a deep breath. I know I've been a monster. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even fully understand. And I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything. His eyes met mine, clear and steady for the first time in years. But I am sorry, Anna. And I want to be better. Not to get you back. I know that's not possible. But because you deserve better. You always did. I stared at him, thrown off balance by his words. This wasn't what I had expected. I had prepared for anger, for manipulation, for the David I had come to know over the years. This man in front of me, vulnerable and honest, was a stranger. I brought something too, I said finally, reaching into my purse. I pulled out the wooden box and set it on the table. Open it. He looked at me, uncertain, then carefully lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, was the tiny blue baby shoe, smaller than the palm of his hand. Beside it lay an ultrasound picture, the grainy image showing only the vaguest outline of what might have been our child. David's breath caught, his hand hovering over the contents without touching them. How far along were you? Almost 10 weeks when I lost it. Do you know if… His voice broke. If it was a boy or a girl? No. I softened slightly at the genuine grief in his face. It was too early to tell. He closed the box gently, as if afraid of disturbing what lay inside. Why did you keep this? All these years? It was a question I had asked myself many times. Why hold on to this painful reminder? Why preserve this wound? Because it was real, I said finally. Because it existed, even if only for a short time. And because I hesitated, then decided to speak the truth I had never admitted even to myself. Because for a little while, I thought it might save us. That if I hadn't lost it, you would have changed. We would have been a family. David nodded slowly, tears streaming down his face now. I would have tried, he whispered. I would have tried to be the father that child deserved. But you never tried to be the husband I deserved, I said quietly. Not really. He flinched as if I had struck him. No, he agreed. I didn't. We sat in silence for a long moment, the box between us like a monument to all we had lost. Not just the child, but the people we had been, the future we had once imagined together. I went to see my mother this morning, David said suddenly. I told her everything. About my drinking, about how I've treated you, about the baby. I looked up, surprised. Helen had always been his enabler, his defender. What did she say? A bitter smile crossed his face. She told me she wasn't surprised you left, that she had been waiting for it for years. He shook his head. All this time, I thought she was on my side. Turns out, she was just waiting for you to save yourself. I didn't know what to say to that. Helen had never given me any indication that she saw through her son's behavior, that she understood what our marriage had become. She also told me something else, David continued, his voice dropping lower. Something about my father. I frowned, confused by this change in direction. Your father? You barely talk about him. Because I barely knew him. He left when I was 4, remember? But according to my mother, before he left, he was... David swallowed hard. He was like me, drinking, violent. She said he broke her arm once, threw her down the stairs. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. In 6 years of marriage, neither David nor Helen had ever suggested his father was anything but a distant figure who had abandoned his family. Now, suddenly, I was seeing a pattern I hadn't recognized before, a cycle repeating itself across generations. She said she sees him in me now, David continued, his voice hollow. She said she's been watching me become him for years. Why didn't she ever say anything? I asked, stunned. Why didn't she warn me? I asked her that too. He laughed, a broken sound. She said she thought I knew, that I must have recognized it in myself, the same way she recognized it in him. But I didn't, Anna. I swear to you, I didn't see it until now. I wanted to believe him. Part of me, the part that had fallen in love with him, that had dreamed of a future with him, desperately wanted to believe that this realization would change everything, that he could break the cycle. But another part of me, the nurse who had seen too many women return to abusive partners after promises of change, knew better. I can't come back, I said gently. You understand that, right? He nodded, not meeting my eyes. I know. I'm not asking you to. Then what do you want from me, David? Why are we here? He looked up then, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. I want your forgiveness. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday, when I've earned it. He pushed the wooden box back toward me. And I want you to know that I'm going to try to be better. Not for you, not to get you back, but because I don't want to be my father. I don't want to be the man who threw coffee in his wife's face. I took the box, my fingers brushing against his briefly. I hope you mean that. I do. He hesitated, then added, there's something else. The money. Our savings. It's not all gone. I froze. What do you mean? I lied about how much I spent. Most of it is still there. I transferred it to a different account. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and slid it across the table. This is everything. Account numbers, passwords. It's your money, Anna. It always was. You earned most of it. I stared at the envelope, not touching it. Why would you lie about that? Why make me think you had spent it all? He couldn't meet my eyes. Because I was angry. Because I wanted to hurt you. Because I'm exactly the kind of man who would do something like that. The honesty of his answer shocked me. For the first time, it seemed, David was seeing himself clearly. And he didn't like what he saw. I took the envelope and put it in my purse without opening it. Thank you for telling me the truth. He nodded, then stood, signaling that our conversation was coming to an end. Can I ask you something? Yes. If things had been different, if I had been different, Do you think we would have had more children by now? The question caught me off guard. A glimpse into the alternate life we might have lived. A home filled with children, with laughter instead of fear. I think so, I said softly. I always wanted a big family. Me too. He smiled sadly. I hope you still get that, Anna. The family you deserve. I stood, clutching the wooden box to my chest. I hope you find peace, David. I really do. He nodded, and for a moment I thought he might try to hug me. Instead, he took a step back. Goodbye, Anna. I turned and walked away, feeling his eyes on my back. I didn't look back, not even when I reached Sarah's car and slid into the passenger seat. Are you okay? She asked, concern etched on her face. I looked down at the wooden box in my hands, at the envelope in my purse that represented financial freedom. No, I said honestly, but I think I will be. What I didn't tell her was that despite everything, despite the clarity of our conversation, despite my certainty that leaving was the right choice, a part of me still loved the man I had just walked away from. Not the man who had thrown coffee in my face, but the man who had looked at me with such love on a beach in Maui. The man who might have been the father of my children in another life. And that was the most painful truth of all, that love doesn't die easily, even when it should, even when staying would destroy you. As Sarah pulled out of the parking lot, I caught a glimpse of David still standing by the picnic table, watching us leave. His shoulders were slumped, his head bowed. He looked defeated, broken. But so had I, for far too long. Now it was time for both of us to put the pieces back together, separately. What I didn't know then was that our paths would cross again sooner than I expected, in a way neither of us could have anticipated, and that the truth David had shared with me that day was only part of a much larger secret, one that would force me to question everything I thought I knew about our marriage. 3 months passed, spring turned to summer, and I slowly began to build a new life for myself. The money David had returned to me, nearly our entire savings, became the foundation of my fresh start. I found a small apartment close to the hospital where I worked, furnished it simply but comfortably, and settled into a routine that was entirely my own. No walking on eggshells, no anticipating mood swings, no cleaning up after someone else's destructive impulses. Sarah had been right about the domestic violence counselor. Janet became my lifeline, helping me navigate the complex emotions that came with leaving. The grief, the guilt, the lingering love, and most surprisingly, the fear of freedom. After years of having my choices constrained by David's unpredictable temper, the sudden expanse of possibilities was terrifying. It's normal, Janet assured me during one of our weekly sessions. When you've spent years adapting to someone else's needs and moods, learning to listen to your own wants and needs again takes time. I took her advice to heart, making small decisions each day that were purely for myself. I painted my bedroom a soft blue that David would have hated. I adopted a cat from the shelter, something David had always vetoed due to his allergies. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, reconnected with friends I had gradually lost touch with during my marriage. I heard about David occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He had, as promised, sought help for his drinking. He had joined AA, was seeing a therapist, had even moved to a smaller apartment to save money. Part of me was genuinely happy for him, hopeful that he could break the cycle of abuse that had claimed both him and his father. But another part remained wary, remembering too many broken promises, too many temporary changes. I hadn't seen him since that day in the park, and I had no desire to. The divorce proceedings were happening through our lawyers, amicable so far. David had agreed to my terms without argument, asking only to keep a few sentimental items from our marriage. Life was settling into a new normal, and I was healing, slowly but surely. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was leaving the hospital after a long shift, bone-tired and looking forward to a hot bath and an early night, when my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Is this Anna Mitchell? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes, this is she. This is Mercy Hospital. We have a David Mitchell here. You're listed as his emergency contact. My heart stuttered. What happened? Is he okay? He was in a car accident. He's stable, but he's asking for you. I closed my eyes, leaning against my car. We're separated. Divorcing, actually. I understand, the woman said, her voice softening. But he's quite insistent. He says he needs to tell you something important. I should have said no. I had worked so hard to establish boundaries, to create distance between us. But something in her voice, or perhaps something in my own heart, made me hesitate. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The drive to Mercy Hospital felt surreal, like moving through a dream. I had been so careful to avoid any possibility of running into David these past months, and now I was voluntarily going to his bedside. Janet would probably tell me this was a mistake, that I was putting myself back into his orbit, risking the progress I had made. But she would also understand that some ties can't be severed with a divorce decree. Some connections linger, for better or worse. The emergency room was busy, nurses and doctors moving quickly between curtained-off areas. I gave David's name at the desk and was directed to a bed in the far corner. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The sight of him shocked me. David's face was badly bruised. A deep gash ran along his hairline, and his left arm was in a cast. But it wasn't just the injuries. He looked different somehow. Thinner, certainly, but also softer around the edges, less tightly wound. His eyes were closed, but they fluttered open as I approached. Recognition dawned, followed by a mix of emotions too complex to name. Anna. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. You came. I stayed at the foot of the bed, maintaining a safe distance. They said you were asking for me. He tried to sit up, wincing with the effort. I didn't think you would come. What happened? I asked, gesturing to his injuries. Drunk driver, he said with a bitter smile. Ironic, right? I'm finally sober, and I get hit by someone who isn't. Are you okay? I mean, besides the obvious. Broken arm, concussion, some cuts and bruises. Nothing life-threatening. He looked at me directly. I'm sorry to drag you into this. I know you've been trying to move on. I shifted uncomfortably. The nurse said you needed to tell me something important. I do. He glanced around the busy ER. But not here. Not like this. David. Please, Anna. Just hear me out. When I get discharged, tomorrow, they think. Can we meet? Somewhere public. Like before. I promise this is the last time I'll ask anything of you. I should have said no. Every instinct told me to walk away, to maintain the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. But the urgency in his voice, combined with his vulnerable state, wore down my resistance. Fine. Text me when you're discharged. We can meet at the cafe near my apartment. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. I nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. Anna? I meant what I said before, about trying to be better. 3 months sober now. I looked back at him, this man who had once been the center of my world. I'm glad, David. I really am. As I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. What could be so important that he needed to tell me in person? Was he sick? Was he moving away? Was he trying to reconcile? The thought made my stomach clench. I had come too far, healed too much to consider going back. But a small, traitorous part of me wondered, if he had truly changed, if the man I had originally fallen in love with had somehow returned, could we find our way back to each other? I pushed the thought away as I pulled into my apartment complex. My cat, Milo, greeted me at the door, winding between my legs and demanding attention. I picked him up, burying my face in his soft fur. What am I doing? I whispered. The next day dawned bright and clear. I had the day off and spent the morning cleaning my apartment, trying to distract myself from thoughts of the upcoming meeting. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Discharged. Can we meet at 2? I texted back a simple, yes, and spent the next hour changing my outfit 3 times, angry at myself for caring what I looked like. This wasn't a date. This was closure, or at least it should be. The cafe was busy when I arrived, filled with the afternoon crowd of students and remote workers. I spotted David immediately, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. His face looked worse today, the bruises darkened to a deep purple, making him look vulnerable and beaten down. He stood awkwardly as I approached, hampered by his injuries. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I sat down, noting the untouched coffee in front of him. "You're welcome. What's this about, David?" He took a deep breath, wincing slightly at the movement. "The accident. It made me realize something. Life is fragile, more fragile than I ever understood before." He looked down at his hands. "When that car hit me, my first thought wasn't about dying. It was about regret, about all the things I'd never get to make right." I tensed, preparing for a plea to reconcile. "David, please just let me finish." He reached into his jacket pocket with his good hand and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is what I needed to give you." I took it hesitantly, unfolding it to find what appeared to be medical records. I scanned it quickly, my nurse's training helping me decipher the information. It was a genetic screening report. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at him. "After our talk in the park, I kept thinking about what you said. About the baby." His voice caught on the word. "About why I couldn't change for you when I claimed I would have changed for our child. It haunted me." I waited, confused about where this was going. I started doing research about family patterns of alcoholism and violence, about genetic predispositions. He gestured to the paper in my hand. "I got tested for everything I could think of, and they found something." I looked back at the report, focusing on the highlighted section. "Huntington's disease?" He nodded grimly. "My father had it. That's why he was the way he was. The mood swings, the aggression, the drinking to self-medicate. My mother never told me. She just let me believe he was a violent drunk who abandoned us." I stared at him, stunned. Huntington's disease was a progressive brain disorder that caused uncontrolled movements, emotional problems, and loss of cognition. It was genetic, and children of affected parents had a 50% chance of inheriting it. "You tested positive," I whispered, reading the results more carefully now. "Yes." His voice was steady, though I could see the fear behind his eyes. "I'm in the early stages. The mood swings, the impulsivity, the aggression. They weren't just me being a terrible person, Anna. They were symptoms." I shook my head, trying to process this information. "But the drinking was my way of dealing with symptoms I didn't understand." He leaned forward. "I'm not making excuses. The drinking made everything worse. The way I treated you was unforgivable. Disease or no disease. But I needed you to know that there was more to it than just me being like my father. There was a reason he was the way he was. And there's a reason I've been struggling too." I sat back, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath me. All this time, I had thought David's behavior was simply a choice, a character flaw, perhaps a learned pattern from his mysterious father. The idea that there might be a medical explanation had never occurred to me. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Just a few weeks. I was going to call you, but I kept putting it off." He gave a rueful smile. "The accident forced my hand." "Why tell me at all? We're getting divorced. This doesn't change anything between us." David's expression softened. "It changes everything for you, Anna. That's why I had to tell you." He nodded at the paper still in my hands. "Huntington's is genetic. If we'd had our baby, it would have had a 50% chance of inheriting the gene from me." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Our lost child might have been spared a lifetime of suffering from this cruel disease, and any future children I might have had with David would have faced the same risk. "There's something else," he said quietly. "About that night. The night you lost the baby." I stiffened. "What about it?" "I remember more than I let on. Not everything, but flashes. I remember shoving you. I remember how scared you looked." His voice broke. "I've been lying to myself for years, pretending I didn't know what happened. But I did know. Some part of me always knew I was responsible." Tears filled my eyes, not for the man sitting across from me, but for the woman I had been. Young, frightened, blaming herself for a tragedy that wasn't her fault. "I wanted you to know the truth," David continued. "All of it. Not to win you back or make you forgive me, but because you deserve to know that none of it was your fault. Not the miscarriage, not my behavior, none of it." I wiped my eyes, struggling to find words for the storm of emotions inside me. Relief, grief, anger, a strange kind of vindication. They all swirled together, making it hard to think clearly. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "With your condition? There's no cure," he said simply. "The symptoms will get worse over time. The doctors say I might have 10 good years before things get really bad. After that," he shrugged, trying for nonchalance but not quite achieving it. "I've made arrangements. Long-term care insurance, power of attorney for medical decisions. I won't burden anyone else with this." The finality in his voice struck me. David was facing a death sentence, and he was facing it alone. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Despite everything, I wouldn't wish this fate on anyone, least of all someone I had once loved so deeply. Don't be. In a strange way, it's been a relief to know there's a reason, that I'm not just—" He trailed off, then met my eyes directly. "The thing is, Anna, I would have become like this no matter what. Even if I'd known about the baby, even if I'd tried harder, the disease would have progressed. I would have hurt you worse eventually, maybe even our child." The thought sent a chill through me. In a twisted way, had the miscarriage spared us all from a worse fate? "So, in the end," he continued, "leaving was the right choice. You saved yourself. And now that you know about this, you can truly move forward without any doubts." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. Behind the bruises and the gauntness, I could still see traces of the man I had fallen in love with. The man who, in another life, free from this cruel disease, might have been the husband and father I had dreamed of. "What can I do?" I asked, surprising myself. "To help?" He shook his head firmly. "Nothing. This isn't your burden to bear, Anna. I just wanted you to have all the facts. For closure." Closure. The word seemed inadequate for what was happening between us. This wasn't just an ending. It was a complete rewriting of our shared history, a new lens through which to view the pain we had caused each other. "Thank you," I said finally, "for telling me the truth." He nodded, then glanced at his watch. "I should go. I have a doctor's appointment." He stood awkwardly, hampered by his cast. "Take care of yourself, Anna." As he turned to leave, I was struck by a sudden realization. This might be the last time I ever saw him. The thought was overwhelming, a finality I wasn't prepared for. "David," I called after him. He turned back. "I don't regret marrying you. Not all of it, anyway." A sad smile crossed his face. "I don't deserve that kindness. But thank you." I watched him walk away. This man who had been the center of my world for so long. A man who had hurt me deeply, but who was now facing his own immeasurable pain. I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to it. Understanding, perhaps. Compassion. As I gathered my things to leave, I noticed he had left something on the table. A small key with a tag attached to it. I picked it up, reading the neat handwriting on the tag. "Storage unit number 247, City Storage. For when you're ready." I slipped the key into my pocket, wondering what it meant. What could David have left for me that he couldn't simply give me himself? That question would haunt me for the next several weeks as I tried to decide whether to use the key or simply mail it back to him. In the end, curiosity won out. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, I drove to City Storage, the key burning a hole in my pocket. Unit number 247 was in the back of the facility, a small 5x5 space with a padlock that matched my key. I hesitated before opening it, unsure what I would find inside. More revelations about David's condition? Mementos from our marriage? With a deep breath, I turned the key and pulled up the rolling door. What I found inside would change everything I thought I knew about my husband, our marriage, and the future that lay ahead of me. The storage unit contained a single item, a large wooden chest I recognized from David's childhood home. His mother had kept it in the attic, filled with family heirlooms and memories. I approached it cautiously, kneeling down to lift the heavy lid. Inside, carefully organized, was our entire life together, but not as I remembered it. Photo albums I had never seen, filled with pictures of us throughout our marriage. But these weren't casual snapshots or posed holiday photos. These were meticulously documented moments of our life together, each labeled with a date and a brief description in David's neat handwriting. Anna's graduation from nursing school, the proudest day of my life. Our third anniversary. Anna made her famous lasagna. I brought home tulips, her favorite. Anna sleeping on the couch after a double shift. She works so hard for us. Hundreds of photos, spanning our entire relationship. Moments I barely remembered, small daily occurrences that I had never realized David had noticed, let alone documented. Beneath the albums was a stack of journals, dozens of them, each dated and filled with David's handwriting. I opened one from early in our marriage. I woke up to Anna singing in the shower again. That little habit of hers makes me smile every morning. How did I get so lucky? Today I'm going to try to leave work early and surprise her with dinner. I flipped to another, from about 3 years into our marriage. Had another blackout last night. Anna says I shouted at her about the dinner being cold, but I don't remember. She had that look in her eyes. Fear. I'm terrified of becoming my father. Started looking into AA meetings today. And another, from just after what must have been the night I lost the baby, though he didn't know about the pregnancy then. I did something terrible last night. The look on Anna's face. I can't bear to write it down. The drinking is getting worse. The rages are getting worse. I don't recognize myself anymore. Anna deserves better than this. I keep trying to stop, to be better for her, but something inside me feels broken. Tears streamed down my face as I continued reading. Journal after journal documenting the slow deterioration of the man I had married, his desperate attempts to control his worsening symptoms, his shame and self-loathing over how he treated me. The most recent journal, dated just weeks before our separation, contained a single heartbreaking entry. I think I'm losing my mind. The mood swings are getting worse. I'm having thoughts I can't control. Today I found myself staring at Anna while she was reading, and I had this sudden urge to hurt her. It terrified me. What's happening to me? What kind of monster am I becoming? I need to protect her from myself. At the very bottom of the chest was a sealed envelope with my name on it. My hands trembling, I opened it to find a letter written in David's careful script. Dear Anna, if you're reading this, it means you found the courage to look inside this chest. I've been keeping these records for years, partly to hold on to the good memories as I felt myself slipping away, but also as evidence of what was happening to me. I needed to believe there was a reason for the changes in my behavior, even before I knew about the Huntingtons. I want you to have these not as an excuse for how I treated you, but as an explanation. There was a war going on inside me, between the man who loved you more than life itself and the disease that was slowly taking control. In the end, the disease won. But please know that I fought it with everything I had. When I told you I didn't remember the worst things I did, it wasn't entirely true. I remembered some of it, in flashes and fragments. The shame was overwhelming. It was easier to pretend I didn't remember than to face what I was becoming. The doctors tell me the disease will continue to progress. The mood swings, the aggression, the cognitive decline. It will all get worse. I couldn't bear the thought of you watching that happen, of you feeling obligated to care for me as I deteriorate. You've already endured too much. I want you to know 3 things. First, leaving me was the right decision. You saved yourself, and in a way, you saved me too. The thought of hurting you further was unbearable. Second, none of what happened was your fault. You were perfect, loving, patient, kind, far more than I deserved. The fault was in my genes, in my brain, in the disease that's slowly consuming me. Third, and most important, I want you to be happy, to build the life and family you always wanted, to find someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved, steadily, safely, without the shadow of disease hanging over you both. With all my heart, the parts that are still mine, David. I sat on the floor of the storage unit for what felt like hours, surrounded by the fragments of our life together, by the evidence of David's internal struggle, the conflict between the man he wanted to be and the disease that was changing him from within. It was a gift, in its way, a painful, difficult gift, but one that allowed me to finally understand what had happened to us. Not just his disease, but his awareness of it, his attempts to fight it, and ultimately, his choice to let me go for my own protection. When I finally left the storage unit, taking only the letter and one of the photo albums, I felt a weight lifting, the weight of unanswered questions, of blame, of what-ifs that had haunted me for months. David had given me the truth, all of it, without asking for anything in return. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even understanding. Just the freedom to move forward with clear eyes and an open heart. 1 year later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Milo was curled at my feet, and inside, the sounds of my book club discussing this month's selection drifted through the open door. I had found a rhythm to my new life. Work at the hospital, where I had recently been promoted to head nurse on my floor. Weekly dinners with Sarah and her family. Volunteer work at the local domestic violence shelter. And quiet evenings at home with books, music, and solitude that no longer felt lonely. I still thought of David occasionally. I had learned through mutual friends that he had moved to a smaller city to be closer to a specialized treatment center for Huntington's. He was still sober, still seeing his therapist, still fighting the disease that was slowly claiming him. I sent him a birthday card each year, and he sent me one in return. Simple acknowledgments that we still existed in the world, that we still wished each other well from a distance. The divorce had been finalized 6 months after our meeting at the cafe. I kept my maiden name, reclaiming that piece of my identity along with so many others. Janet, my counselor, had helped me work through the complex emotions surrounding David's diagnosis. The guilt over leaving someone who was ill, the relief that there had been a medical explanation for his behavior, the lingering grief for what might have been in another life. Compassion doesn't mean you made the wrong choice, she told me during one of our final sessions. You can understand his struggle while still protecting yourself. That had become my mantra in the months that followed. Compassion without compromise, understanding without surrender. As my friends laughed together in my living room, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. I had survived. Not just the physical danger of an abusive relationship, but the emotional aftermath, the self-doubt, the fear, the grief for lost dreams. In their place, I had built something new, a life that was wholly mine, shaped by my choices, filled with people who loved me safely and consistently. The wooden box that had once held my deepest secret now sat openly on my bookshelf, a reminder not of what I had lost, but of how far I had come. The tiny shoe remained inside, along with the ultrasound picture, but I had added other items. A pressed flower from the bouquet Sarah had brought me the day I moved into my new apartment. A bracelet from the women at the shelter, made during an art therapy session. A polished stone given to me by a patient who had survived her own abusive relationship. Symbols not just of grief, but of resilience, of rebuilding. A knock at the sliding door drew me from my thoughts. Lisa, one of my newer friends from the hospital, stepped onto the balcony. "Everything okay out here?" she asked, handing me a glass of wine. "Just enjoying the view," I replied with a smile. "It's gorgeous," she agreed, leaning against the railing beside me. "So, Anna Mitchell, head nurse extraordinaire, what's next for you?" I considered the question, looking out at the horizon stretching before me, wide open, full of possibilities. "I'm thinking about going back to school," I said. "Nurse practitioner, maybe, or possibly working with domestic violence survivors in a more official capacity." "Both sound perfect for you," she said, nudging my shoulder with hers. "Whatever you choose, you're going to be amazing." As we turned to rejoin the others inside, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The future was uncertain, as all futures are, but it was mine to shape, mine to explore, mine to fill with the love and purpose and joy that had once seemed beyond my reach. I had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. The burns had healed, leaving scars that told a story of survival, of strength I hadn't known I possessed. David had given me many things over the years, some beautiful, many painful, a few that had nearly broken me. But in the end, his greatest gift had been the truth about himself, about our marriage, about the disease that had shaped both our lives in ways we never could have imagined. And in that truth, painful as it was, I had found my freedom. As I closed the balcony door behind me, stepping back into the warmth of my home, filled with the voices of people who valued and respected me, I knew with certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Not a victim, not a survivor. Simply myself, Anna. Whole and healing, scarred but not broken. Moving forward one day at a time into the light after darkness.